Good morning and happy Friday to everybody. I hope you have a nice weekend planned. Um, I was reading some of my emails. One of them was from a gun rights organization, and they were mentioning about a bill going through Congress. I'm not sure how far along it is yet. I honestly doubt it'll pass, but the bill, they call it Nationwide Concealed Carry Permit Reciprocity. What that essentially means is that if you have a concealed carry permit issued by any one state, that it would be honored by every other state. Okay, that sounds nice. It shouldn't be necessary because, in my view, um, we have 29 states, soon to be 30, if North Carolina jumps aboard um, with permitless carry. A lot of times they call it constitutional carry, but that's not really a fair term to use. Permitless carry is correct. If it were really constitutional carry, there wouldn't be any gun-free zones, or at least any unsecured gun-free zones. You can have a state that has permitless carry, but there's so many places where it's illegal to carry, or they put a restriction. Well, you can only carry concealed, you can't carry openly, um, you can't be on a public street, which there are some states that do. Even though they have permitless carry, they severely restrict where you can go with it. So, but permitless carry is a good acronym or a good moniker for it. But nevertheless, as I said, 29 states now have permitless carry. But with national reciprocity, I don't think a law should be necessary. If you follow the Constitution, Article 4, Section 1 requires every state to give full faith and credit to the writs, acts, warrants, and judicial proceedings of every other state. Well, if you have a concealed carry permit, at least in Virginia, it's a judicial proceeding. It's granted by the circuit court of the county or city in which you live. So, same thing as a marriage license, an arrest warrant, and you even say that a act would be a driver's license. So if I have a driver's license from Virginia, I can drive in Ohio and I don't have to stop and get a driver's license for Ohio. Ohio recognizes a Virginia driver's license. Um, you're still subject to their laws, but they recognize your ability to drive through there. I don't have to register my license plates in Ohio if I'm just passing through. Um, the same thing with marriage license. My wife and I were married here in Virginia. So if we move to Minnesota, or Minnesota as they call it, if we move to Minnesota, we don't have to get married again in Minnesota. The they honor our marriage license. If I would be accused of a crime, let's say in Virginia, and an arrest warrant were issued, or a capias or whatever you call it in your jurisdiction, and I'm driving in Arizona and I get stopped by law enforcement for a traffic violation, and they run my information and it comes back that I'm wanted. If it's something minor, it's not going to be extraditable. They're just going to tell you, hey, get it taken care of when you get home. You got a warrant for your arrest. Okay. Other times, a warrant, if it's something more serious, it'll say on there something like extradite nationwide. Let's say you're accused of some kind of felony, something serious. Um, in that case, that sheriff or that police officer in another state, such as Arizona, Nevada, New Mexico, or whatnot, will take you into custody. And the authorities from the jurisdiction where the warrant was issued say you committed a crime in Virginia, they will extradite you home. So states do honor and reciprocate already for so many other things. Well, why is a firearms permit any different? Sometimes you'll hear certain politicians say, well, we don't want more people carrying guns, or we don't want problems with out of state criminals. Well, that's a weak argument because we don't have a problem with people getting a permit in Virginia and driving to Ohio and robbing liquor stores. We don't have problems with people from Pennsylvania who have permits coming down into Virginia and using a concealed handgun to commit violent felony. It generally doesn't happen. People who have firearms permits are generally among the most law-abiding people anywhere. In many cases, they're more law-abiding than police officers themselves. They're a very safe subset of the population. I've had a concealed carry permit for 30 years now. Um, I don't I rarely ever carry, but if I feel the need, I can if I want to. Virginia is also an open carry state. You can openly carry a firearm, visible in your holster without a permit. Now, I believe doing that is tactically unsound. Other people will disagree with me, and that's fine. But I believe you should carry it concealed. But if you have a permit, it serves two purposes. The first purpose is that if you are carrying openly, let's say you've got your jacket behind your pistol and you can see it and you move and your coat covers your pistol. Well, if you don't have a permit and you get spotted by law enforcement, you could end up being arrested and charged with a class one misdemeanor, even if you had no criminal intent. Uh, Another thing that concealed carry does, it provides a tactical advantage. If some numbskull goes into let's say you're in a store and you're carrying concealed, and some numbskull goes in there and tries to threaten somebody's life or start shooting people or whatnot, you have some element of tactical advantage. Now, if he's got a rifle and he's 100 feet away and you've got a handgun, there's not really a lot you can do. But in many cases, if you're up close, you might be able to do something. If you're carrying openly, he's going to see you and probably take you out first. Now, the open carry people will say, well, if he sees that you're open carrying, it's going to deter him from committing a crime. Maybe. I don't know. Is that true? Who knows? But I know if I were a bad guy, I would be looking to take out somebody who could take me out. So you sort of have to think like a bad guy in that regard. But I do think that it is good that we have a law going through like that. And Donald Trump, who's not exactly a big Second Amendment guy, actually did say that he favored reciprocity for concealed carry. Um, I don't totally trust him on the Second Amendment, but he's obviously better than Kamala Harris in that regard. But nevertheless, I don't like the idea of just making more federal laws for things. Um, if we followed the Constitution, much of this wouldn't be necessary. So you get into a situation, okay, well, you have states that aren't following the Constitution. So do we use the federal government as a cudgel to force them to do that? And then what happens? A state like New York or New Jersey, Connecticut, Massachusetts, which are very, very anti-gun, anti-Second Amendment states, if you do force this national reciprocity through, what's to stop them at the state level for saying, well, you can't carry a firearm in a town with more than 3,000 people. You can't carry a firearm within so many feet of a school or so many feet of a church or so many feet of a business that doesn't allow firearms. And what there are secondary and tertiary effects of this that need to be considered. But I do like the reasoning behind it. But I just, this thing of, let's use the federal government. If we can't get the state to do what we want, let's automatically use the federal government to force it through. And that strategy can be like crossing a rattlesnake with a boomerang. It can come back around to bite you because anytime you make the government stronger or the government bigger to do something that you think is right or you think is necessary, the people on the other side of the aisle or the people who are your political opponents will eventually get control of that government and use it in a way you don't like. So much of that is going on now with the Trump presidency. There were so many, basically, the Biden administration and the, Obama and even the Bushes and the Clintons, uh, even Reagan to a certain extent. These people had used the big government to do things to force the states into doing other things that they thought was right. But then when the other party gets control, then it stands to reason they're going to do the same thing. Which is, you know, if you're going to if you're going to make the government bigger, you have to remember that the more powerful you make the government, the more powerful the other people on the people on ideologically opposed to you are going to get control of that government in a few years, because the political winds change every so often. So, you know, there's kind of a caveat there with that. I think that uh, we have the 29 states with permitless carry. A good thing is that not one of them has sought to repeal it. Every time a state has done that, you know, the predicted bloodbath, oh, people are going to be shooting each other in the streets. And a lot of people think that and this is because of our lousy media in this country, but they think that permitless carry just means that, well, if you're a criminal or you're a felon, now you can carry legally. No, that's not what that means. You still can't carry if you're a prohibited person. If you're a felon, if you've been adjudicated mentally ill, mentally defective, or whatnot, if you're ineligible to buy or possess a firearm, you can't suddenly just go out and carry it. This basically, the permitless carry thing is just basically for peaceable, law-abiding citizens. If you're law-abiding, you don't have a criminal record, and nothing stops you from buying a firearm at a dealer or whatever, then you can carry without a permit. Uh, Another advantage to having a permit, even states that don't require it, uh, if you live in a state like that, then maybe that puts you at a disadvantage if you go to another state. But Virginia recognizes permits. From what I understand, we recognize permits from every other state, but other states don't always recognize a Virginia permit. So there's difference between recognition and reciprocity. With recognition, Virginia will just say, if you have a permit from Washington, D.C. or Maryland, we will recognize it. Reciprocity is like, say, Virginia and North Carolina. If you have a permit from North Carolina, Virginia reciprocates that if North Carolina recognizes a Virginia permit. Some states have reciprocity laws, some have recognition. There's a big difference in that. Maryland and Washington, D.C. do not at all recognize a permit from Virginia. West Virginia doesn't require permits. I don't know if they issue them, but they are a permitless carry state. So is Tennessee, and so is Kentucky. So three of our neighbors are permitless carry states. For North Carolina and Maryland and DC are not permitless carry states. If you go to some states like New York, you can't even open carry. You have to have a permit, and you can only carry concealed with a permit, but that permit's not valid in New York City or I believe Long Island. They have a separate category for that. So if you live in upstate New York, let's say you're in Ulster County or Putnam County or Dutchess County, well, maybe not. They're not really very pro-gun, but let's say you live in a county farther upstate that's in the rural area, and your sheriff decides you're okay and you pass the test. He can issue you a concealed carry permit that's valid in New York, but it won't be valid in the city. And by default, I don't think you can have it on Long Island either, because you have to go through the city to be on Long Island. So that would be Suffolk, Nassau counties. But nevertheless, it'll be interesting to see where this goes. I know that the pro-gun groups like the Gun Owners of America, the National Rifle Association, the Virginia Citizens Defense League, they favor the reciprocity law, although they recognize that we shouldn't need it in the first place. But until we get truly constitutional courts and a constitution-based legislature, you got to take what you can get. So I support I support the bill. I wrote my congressman, John McGuire, and I told him he should support it. And he sent me back a nice letter saying that he probably would. So that's a good thing. But nevertheless, um, I just, people need to realize this is not just something where, you know, it's going to be like the wild, wild west, because the bad guys are already armed. They don't care about the law. So why not have decent people armed as well? Um, Not long ago, we had a shooting at a Harris Teeter, which is a supermarket chain. It was west of Charlottesville in a town called Crozet. I guess it was about 6 weeks ago. A guy had mental illness. He had he took a rifle and he went into the parking lot and he shot a man. He didn't know the guy or anything. The guy never did anything to him. It was just a total random killing. He shot and killed the guy coming out of Harris Teeter. And then there was a woman in a car and he shot and killed her. And there was an off duty police officer. They never did say what jurisdiction. They said he was federal. So that could have been INS, it could have been Border Patrol, it could have been Federal Railroad Police, it could have been maybe TSA, um, CIA, Marshal Service, military police. They wouldn't say, but nevertheless, there was a federal law enforcement officer carrying concealed, and he came out and engaged the gunman and killed him. So, um, you know, who knows how many people that gunman would have killed if that person carrying concealed. Now, the person was a law enforcement officer, but there have been many other times when a ordinary civilian carrying concealed has stopped a shooting like that. So that's another beauty of concealed carry. Um, Private citizens with carry permits tend to have a better average of shooting the criminal than police do. That's not a dig on law enforcement, but when law enforcement arrives, they come after, they're responding, something's going on, the adrenaline is high. They don't really know who's the bad guy, who's the good guy, and they have to show up and wonder if there's more than one bad guy. So law enforcement has a tougher job in that regard. But if you're just a person and you're carrying concealed and a guy pulls a gun out and shoots a cashier next to you, well, you know, you saw what happened. You know who the bad guy is. You've got a chance at a clear shot at taking the guy out. So you're going to have better odds at catching the guy by surprise because he's not going to know you're armed and you're right there. A police officer is in uniform and the bad guy knows who the police officer is, and the bad guy will see him coming. So, you know, there's it's very nuanced. And just don't fall for the rhetoric where everybody says, oh, it's just going to be people running around shooting each other. Ladies and gentlemen, we have more than 100 million citizens in the United States who possess well over 400 million guns and about 2.5 trillion rounds of ammunition. If ordinary gun owners were the problem, we would be well aware of it by now. So just, you know, also keep in mind that the areas of the United States that have the most guns per capita tend to be safer than places where guns are severely restricted or outright prohibited. So just something to think about. But if you live in a district where you're in touch with your congressman, I would urge you to write them and tell them to support this bill. Whether you're a Democrat, a Republican, a Libertarian, or a Vegetarian, it doesn't matter. The Second Amendment is your constitutional right, and we should always be looking to politicians who are going to stand up for the rights of United States citizens over the rights of weird special interest groups, foreign governments, illegal aliens, and whatnot. So, you know, um, just keep that in mind. And a gun is just a tool. It's like a shovel, a rake, an axe, a knife, or even a torch. It can be used for great good. It can be used for great evil. It's the hands that hold it that are the problem. All right. That's the end of my stream today. Everybody have a great morning or a great afternoon or a great evening wherever you are. And never forget, it's always 5 o'clock somewhere.